And the first of those, of course, was expenditure of state money for this purpose. And secondly was the diversion of staff and treatment time in our institutions. But I did mention to the board that I conceived to be probably the most serious effect of all was the adverse reaction we are getting in the areas of recruitment and retention, that professional people whom we do need, and we need very badly in this state, and whom we have had phenomenal success in securing over the past several years, are now very hesitant to come into the situation that's been created here by the discovery proceedings that are taking place. And even worse, we find that our own professionals, our highly skilled professionals, are becoming very disturbed and distraught and really disillusioned with the situation as it exists, because they're not being allowed to devote their time to the purpose for which they were employed. And I know the superintendents and directors are concerned, and we have had defections, you might say, from our professional ranks, that these people can seek occupational employments most anywhere, and certainly they're going into a more stable situation.
And I think everything, literally everything, from the way we register our voters to the way we count our votes, needs to be looked at and examined. And I think we need to update our system. We need to streamline it. We need to make it more efficient. I think we can save the voters, and that's me and you, more money. I think we spend too much money on our elections, and I think that we can make it function not only more efficiently, but also perhaps a little more fairly. The contest in Coosa County involves the way absentee votes were cast. That's not the first time that this has arisen, and we need to put safeguards on the way we cast our absentee votes so that we can ensure that that method, which was designed to facilitate a person's right to vote, is not abused, so that elections are not stolen or the process is not manipulated. The electoral process, the process that we exercise when we go to the polls, is our means of exerting our will as voters. It's our way of expressing ourselves in the elections, in the electoral process, and it should be as fair and honest as possible. And I think that we need to make safeguards and build in safeguards into our system to make sure that the votes are counted properly and accurately, and that the system is not or cannot be abused, or at least we need to ensure that it's abused as little as possible.
There were some surprising upsets in House elections this year. Many of the old, familiar faces will be missing. Nonetheless, more of the 105 members of the lower chamber will be returning than in past years. House Speaker Joe McCorkadale, who presides over that body, is optimistic about the work before the new legislature in January.
I've been impressed by the new members that I have met. They are very much interested and seem dedicated to working toward a good session next year.
Does the large number of returning incumbents mean you might have less problems?
Well, of course, it will mean that we'll have much more experience to work with. We only had 31 returning incumbents 4 years ago, and this creates somewhat of a problem. Of course, we'll have a new administration, which, as you know, will be the first that we've had in some time, and there will be an adjustment there. But I'm very optimistic over the new administration and very encouraged over the plans. And I think that with the legislative outlook and what we have to move with, I'm real excited about it, frankly.
Most Alabama legislatures have been criticized for their lack of action, especially the last group. The new legislature, which gathers in January, will have 4 years to try and improve that image. Dave Rickey, WSFA TV News.
Resurfacing crews will be coming in tomorrow morning to resurface Decatur Street in its eventual conversion from two-way traffic to southbound traffic alone. Sergeant Robert Benson of the Montgomery Police Department's Traffic Division says that traffic will be closed from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. except to crossing traffic.
All the major cross streets, starting with Dexter, Washington Avenue, Adams Avenue, High Street, Arbor, and South, will be open for cross traffic. We suggest that anyone wishing to go north or south into or out of Montgomery use Union Street going north and Hull Street going south.
How long will the repaving take?
We're going to start, the crews will be out at 6 a.m. Saturday the 21st, and we hope to be through by 6 p.m. Saturday.
This has nothing to do with changing it into a one-way street other than just repaving it, right?
No, so this is just a preparation to change it into a one-way street. It'll still be two-way traffic, north and south, until such time as the changeover can be completed, and then the city will give proper notice.
Sergeant Vinson says that access won't be denied to those who live or work on Decatur, but he does remind those motorists that they will face wet tar. The resurfacing is in preparation for Decatur Street's conversion to southbound traffic alone. That conversion date, although not firm, is in the next month. Chris Grimshaw on Decatur Street, WSFA TV News.
Dr. C.J. Railing was one of the original drafters of the legislation creating the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences. Prior to October 1st, it was known as the Alabama Department of Toxicology and Criminal Investigation. The agency was created in 1935 because of the contrast between the Lindbergh kidnapping case, where physical evidence was used to convict, and the Scottsboro rape cases, where the lack of physical evidence prevented the judge and jury from determining the truth in the case. Dr. Railing talked with Channel 12 about his past years with the agency.
But I'm not leaving very much. I'm going to be on what we might call active retirement. I'll continue to show interest and have interest in the department and assist in very interesting developments that we've got going now to improve the service.
How does our State Department of Toxicology rank with others among the U.S. or in the U.S.?
Very high. I was just at a meeting of crime lab directors from over North America last week in Washington, and we are very well respected up there, believe me.
Many friends, well-wishers, and state workers have gathered here tonight to pay tribute to a man who gave 43 years of his life to service in Alabama. Janet May, WSFA TV News.
It's a yes or no proposition when voters decide the fate of a proposed constitutional amendment. At the top of Alabama's November 7th general election ballot, way over to the right on the voting machine, is Amendment Number 1, affecting property taxes. The Wallace administration's complex property tax plan was approved by the legislature last summer under the guidance of Representative Rick Manley of Demopolis.
It's going to create 4 classifications of property. Originally, we've had 3 classifications. There's going to be a new 4th classification. Class 1 will be all utility property, which will be assessed at 30% of its fair market value, which is where it was before. Class 2 will cover all business property. In fact, this is the catch-all classification, that everything that doesn't fall in either 1, 3, or 4 comes back in 4. It's business property, and everything else that's not in one of the other classes. This is at 20% of its fair market value, and that's 5% less than it was under the old property tax assessment bill. Then Class 3 is the personal residence, farmland, and forest land classification. And this has been dropped from 15% to 10% of a fair market value. What this means to the individual homeowner is that your private home is dropped 1/3 from where it was under the old classification program, where it was at 15% of its fair market value. And then there was created a new classification, Class 4, for vehicles, automobiles, the private automobile of the individual citizen that you drive, not any rented vehicle or business vehicle. And this is at 15% of fair market value. Previously, these fell under the Class 2 as a business item and at 25%, so it's a substantial reduction in that.
Another proposed change under the adoption of Amendment Number 1 is the extension of the $2,000 homestead exemption to all property taxes levied in the state. Property owners over the age of 65 will be exempt from paying any state property taxes and will receive a $5,000 homestead exemption on all county property taxes. In addition, the disabled, the blind, and people over 65 who have a net annual income of $7,500 or less will be exempt from all state and local property taxes. Another benefit will lower the maximum amount of property taxes payable from 1.5% of fair market value to 1%. Approval of the property tax relief package by the legislature satisfied 2 of the state's most powerful lobbying groups, the Alabama Farm Bureau Federation and the Alabama Education Association. But the Alabama League of Municipalities, representing the heads of local governments, opposes Amendment Number 1. The league claims that the best tax experts have been unable to explain the ultimate changes that could result if the amendment is ratified, And the League fears that unforeseen problems will arise if it is approved, and the problems could not be cured without another constitutional amendment. Amendment number 1 is an outgrowth of anticipated higher taxes resulting from a court-ordered statewide reappraisal, which is bringing sharp increases in the market value of homes and other property. But amendment number 1 is supposed to hold down those tax increases. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Well, it has nothing to do with what kind of issue it is. What's in question here is the procedure under which this legislation was passed. What we're really trying to prove is that the Constitution requires that public notice be given before the state of Alabama can borrow money. If the decision of the Supreme Court, the opinion, the unofficial opinion of the court stands, the state legislature can now borrow money without giving any public notice that it's going to do so. And we're trying to overturn that just as a legislative issue.
What are you asking for specifically then?
We are asking for the act that created the bond issue to be declared unconstitutional.
What action do you wish to take further as far as clearing up the methods by which the state borrows its money?
Well, there is a procedure for passing legislation to borrow money. Those procedures are set out in the Constitution and in statutory law. And in this case, this legislation did not follow the Constitution. And that's all we're trying to prove. And if it is not proved, again, the state can borrow money without giving any public notice by what has to be called a kind of legislative sleight of hand.
Montgomery Housing Authority officials and representatives from the Department of Pensions and Securities used a blowtorch to free Mrs. Adams from her apartment. Once inside, she told officials that she had asked her daughter not to lock the door from the outside because her grandson had to climb in and out of the window when he wanted to leave.
Have you ever asked her to lock the door?
No.
You have not? Did you ask her to put that lock on?
I said a lot of people is looking at him going in and out.
Why do they lock you up in here? Why do they lock you up in this apartment?
Well, last night she told me when I asked about it, she said she had a call to do it.
Do you get an opportunity to cash your own checks? Who cashes your checks for you?
I cash my own check.
Do you use your own money or somebody else take your money?
Somebody take it.
They're taking your money?
No, nobody's not taking my money, but she is doing away with some of it, what I give her to pay bills.
You got that, right?
And I just can't get her to do right to save my life. Every time she go out here, she lock her door. Well, on check day, when I'm going to cash my check, she are glad to open the door to go down there and get her money then. I give her a part of the money to pay bill. And when she get that money, you ask my grandson, did he see me count the money after her? Well, he don't talk very much, but whatever he say, he knows what to say, and he knows about it. Because the people in Greenstone can tell you about every time I'm there to catch my check, she right there.
Ms. Adams, how long has this been going on? How long has she been taking your money from you? How long she's been locking you up in this apartment here?
Oh, I'm telling you the truth, it's been about 2 months, if it ain't that.
Mrs. Adams' plight was brought to the Housing Authority's attention when the building manager went to the apartment to collect the rent, which was 3 months behind. DPS officials say they are currently trying to locate relatives of Mrs. Adams. They also say this situation brings to light the need for more foster homes for elderly people. Janet May, WSFA TV News.
Norman, it's much more difficult for the defendant to prove that he is insane than it is for the state to prove that he is sane. The reason being is that everyone is presumed to be sane. Therefore, if the state should bring forth expert testimony to show that the defendant knew right from wrong at the time he committed the crime, I think the state is pretty well home free, because those who sit on the jury, just like other citizens from the community, presume that everyone is sane. Now, for the defendant, of course, the responsibility is on the defendant part to bring forth evidence to show that he's insane. Consequently, he must not only show this, attempt to show this by expert testimony, but he must also bring in other facts in his background to show that there was some abnormality about his behavior or his habits or traits prior to the time the crime was committed. And this
How difficult is that to do?
Well, it's not difficult if you're dealing with insanity from an organic standpoint. It's very difficult if you're dealing with insanity from an inorganic standpoint, because organic, it means that there's some injury, brain injury, or some mental defect. Inorganic simply means that there's something that has consumed the person's mind that caused him to commit the particular act at the particular time. So that is much more difficult at that time when you're dealing with an inorganic aspect, which in most cases are dealing with inorganic. You have to bring in many abnormal acts in your background, and most of us don't, leading up to the incident, and sometime prior to the incident, some appreciable time prior to the incident. So it could not be an act that just prior to the incident on the particular day the incident occurred, or perhaps 24 hours prior to the incident occurred, but something that shows that this person is a little abnormal or has something erratic about his behavior or thinking.
The state Supreme Court ruled January 14th that in the future, bills affecting less than all local governments must be treated as local bills by the state legislature. But John Watkins, head of the Alabama League of Municipalities, says the court decision failed to take into consideration a section of the state constitution which prohibits the use of local legislation to establish or amend a city charter. In response to the ruling, the league drafted a proposed constitutional amendment which passed the recent special session of the legislature, which provides some relief.
Specifically, this amendment would amend Section 110 of the Constitution, which defines the difference between general bills and local bills. In so doing, this amendment authorizes the legislature to create not more than 8 classes of municipalities for legislative purposes, recognizing that there are differences in needs for legislation according to population classes of cities.
Watkins said he supports Governor George Wallace, who has pointed out that without voter approval of Amendment Number 3, the Constitution as it now stands would keep the cities of Montgomery, Dothan, Phoenix City, Birmingham, and Anniston from making any changes in their charters.
The present Montgomery charter provides for the meeting dates of the city. They could not in the future be changed. They would be locked in as to the meeting times of the council. So we feel that the legislature should have the authority to amend these within bounds provided by this constitutional amendment, and we strongly urge that the people of Alabama ratify Amendment Number 3 to give the legislature this authority, which the Petticourt decision has taken away.
George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
A conference on post-secondary statewide planning for 1980 through 1985 filled a hall in a Montgomery motel, and filling the ears of the attending educators were some words from their respected colleagues from throughout the country. Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs for the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education, Daniel Hobbs, says their greatest future fear is fewer students.
Between 1975 and 1992, the number of 18-year-olds in the nation is expected to go down by approximately 25%. If we have a reduction in higher education, this means we'll need fewer faculty members, perhaps no faculty members, as we move into the middle 80s.
So the job opportunities in higher education will not be increasing in the next decade.
Well, there are some who say that higher education is likely to be the next railroad industry. We are a little more optimistic than that, but certainly with the trends as they are with the decreasing number of traditional college-age students, we do want to plan for it.
Other aspects looked into by the group of educators were the roles of liberal education in statewide planning, factors affecting the planning of post-secondary vocational and technical education, the role of community colleges in statewide planning, and more. Speakers for the Alabama Commission on Higher Education's conference came from Michigan, Oklahoma, California, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and New York. The purpose of the conference is to provide an opportunity for representatives of all segments of post-secondary education in the state to review the critical issues that will have to be addressed in the next decade. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
I abhor the idea, but frankly, in speaking as an individual, and I'm certainly not speaking for the administration. Matter of fact, one of the statements in my talk tonight is I speak strictly as an individual to friends of mine in Alabama. Unless, and I understand the President's going to be outlining his program very soon, but unless there's cooperation with that program, I don't feel that there's any alternative except wage and price controls, because we've got to get it under control. This inflation is making people who have worked all of their lives, 20 to 30 years, for a pension, for retirement, life insurance programs. They thought the $300 or $400 or $500 or $600 they were going to get for the rest of their lives would give them a comfortable, respectable existence. But that inflationary bite of 10% per year, or whatever it amounts to, constantly makes it erode so that those people, by the millions, will soon find themselves, if they are not already there, at the poverty level. My friend...
And then they're going to try to sink this thing in when we get there. Make it look like we're really having a deep conversation, aren't we? First of all, you have to create something that's going to attract some attention. And our artist, Tom Sangster, came up with Rhodey, who is our litter fighter. And we have incorporated that into coloring books, which I've just shown you, into litter bags. We have it on some litter barrels that are 840 some odd litter bags all throughout the state. Then when you get something like that going, when you get some sort of theme and topic, that is not the main thing, but you have to clean up. It costs almost $2 million a year to clean up litter in the state of Alabama. People just don't realize this. When they toss things out, they really shouldn't do it, because every litter bit hurts, as they say.
I understand that you're also getting kids involved in this activity also.
Yes, indeed. What we do, in the coloring book, there is a page in here which invites them to write to us for a litter bag. Then they write to us for the litter bag, and then we send them back this letter, which is signed by Rhodey. Each child gets one.
They have grown old, those who once protected the young from all the dangers of life. Many of the city and county's elderly who receive public assistance are now the victims of thieves too cowardly to pick on someone their own age. And so the old are robbed, some are locked in their houses while their small checks are taken away from them by strangers, but mostly officials say by their own children. Social worker Eddie Ward describes one situation.
We've recently become involved with a case where a lady was living in a home that had been condemned by the city. She was cooking by building an open fire in a pail, and we found that there were two unrelated individuals who were living in the house who were actually taking her check and abusing her physically.
Daycare centers like this one protect the old from those who lie in wait for them, says social worker Kitty Garner.
Oftentimes their relatives work and they are left alone during the day. They are in the homes when they cannot care for their own physical needs. They cannot function in the home, and they are here to enjoy the companionship of other people in the daycare center and to have a more interesting and stimulated life.
Mrs. Garner heads up the foster home project for the Montgomery County LD. For those who are mistreated by family members and those who do not need bedside medical attention, the Pensions and Securities Office provides foster homes, like this one on Maury Street, where 56-year-old Madison McGee lives with one other foster resident, where they are cared for decently. Pensions and Securities Director Ada Kate Morgan says a new law passed in 1977, along with the daycare centers and foster homes program, have helped ease the exploitation and abuse situation for the elderly, but that many cases are not reported, and then she says there are family members.
They want that check. Grandma and Grandpa become more attractive if they've got a big car payment to make and they have a large Social Security check. They will take them in and they'll get fed and they'll get clothed. But so often this money goes for these material things by the children. And it might not really lead up to something where you could ask for a protective placement. But this goes on, and this is just kind of human nature.
One county pensions and security official says the checks that old people get have been stolen from them constantly. They say during one period last August, 12 reports of checks stolen were reported from August 1st through August 12th. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
There are more than 14,000 eligible voters in House District 77. In the November general election, the voters will be choosing between incumbent Democrat Charles Langford and Republican Charles Buddy Spears to be their representative in the state legislature. Langford, a Montgomery attorney, was handpicked by the Democratic Executive Committee last January to fill the unexpired term of Rufus Lewis, now a federal marshal. Langford then won over opposition from 3 independents in a special election. Legislation necessary to halt rising utility rates has top priority in Langford's platform. Endorsed by the Alabama Education Association, the incumbent legislator opposes the diversion of education monies. He seeks guarantees for the employment of minorities and women. Langford states he's a stable representative. He will not jump party nor aid efforts to destroy Alabama State University or any other university, a direct slap at his Republican opponent.
I am referring to my opponent, who is presently a Republican candidate. I have noticed that he seems to play down that part, and none of his campaign literature shows or states that he is a Republican. I can recall that a few years back, this same person ran as a member of the NDPA ticket. So it appears that he jumps from one party to the other.
I'm seeking office on the Republican ticket because all the things that I have interest in correcting in politics has to do with an involvement of some people that is associated with the local democratic structure.
Charles Buddy Spears charges that Langford voted against a legitimate investigation by the legislature of Alabama State University when it was requested.
Because we went before the legislature and we went there with a request that the local delegation of the House condone an investigation in the allegations at Alabama State University. And they voted, the particular representative in my district, he voted against an investigation. Now,
Spears, a local businessman for 24 years, made an unsuccessful entry into politics in 1970 on the NDPA ticket. He says he understands the needs of District 77, needs that are not being met because the problems are politically motivated. Spears charges the incumbent is not providing aggressive leadership in the legislature. Reporting from District 77 in Montgomery County, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
During the state nurses' 65th annual convention, the emphasis will be on leadership in the organization. Ann Zimmerman told the group that they must realize their strength and use it to affect current legislative issues. Over the past year, the American Nurses Association has given approximately $83,000 to congressional candidates. The ANA supports increased geriatric health care, stricter child abuse laws, and national health insurance. Zimmerman urged the nurses to support the causes regardless of the pressure they might receive from doctors.
We have to be sure of several things. We have to be sure that the standards are decent and can be maintained. We have to be sure that the services are accessible to all. Those of you working in community health clinics, in nursing homes who are giving care where you know how limited the opportunity is for some people because of the really restrictive Medicare and Medicaid regulations.
Zimmerman encouraged the nurses to become active in the Nurses Coalition for Action in Politics and to run for political offices. She said the time has come for nurses to begin supporting people whose views coincide with theirs. Janet May, WSFA TV News.
Our expectations, this even flowed easier and better than we even expected, much better than the other streets that was made one way several years ago. And we just think it's working beautifully.
Has there been a lot of confusion among the motorists?
Some, yes. You know, after people go one way for 50 years, they continue to do that. You don't change them overnight. Now, we've got officers out here assisting those people. In fact, on Mondays, we had 33 that was going the wrong way. Our officers assisted those and helped them turn around and get going on the right track.
No tickets are being given yet?
No tickets, no. There's a time period on that. We'll give them plenty of time to get adjusted to it before we start issuing any tickets.
Any accidents as a result of the conversion?
Not one accident on Decatur Street, the portion one way, since it was changed over Monday morning at 5 a.m.
Too much to police. Instead, we're looking into our authority to see if we can take steps to end the differential in price between leaded and unleaded gas, to see to it that the people who obey the law and use unleaded don't subsidize those who break the law.
The EPA estimates that about 5 million cars in the United States have been rigged to take leaded gasoline when they should be using unleaded. As a result, each of those cars becomes about 700% more polluted. Bill Aylward, NBC News, Washington.
We're sorry, but we'll have no time for the dam and cars stories. Tonight's nightly news planning will include, number one, from New York, Mike Jensen on dollar continues decline. Stocks drop another 17 points, 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Number two, Washington, Irving R. Levine on U.S. Economic Outlook.